Pinball machine owners who contact us for technical help are often unaware of specific part names and struggle to describe faults. In this show, I'll take you on a tour to identify common pinball parts.
All Pinball Australia presents the Pinball Expert Show.
I'm Mark Snyder, the founder of Pinball Expert. The names of parts and components you're about to see apply to pinball machines of all ages and brands. Let's start with the lower half of the playfield area. Now, this is the scorecard holder. Now, underneath it you'll find the ball trough assembly, which is in here. This is where the balls sit after play. If your game has a kickback feature, you'll find the assembly under here too, positioned right here. Kickbacks are always on the left. These are the bumpers. They're also known as pop bumpers or jet bumpers, but just bumpers is the most common term used. Now here you have your flippers. The white things are the flipper bats. They have rubbers that go over them to absorb impact so the plastic doesn't break. Very easy to replace, just stretch them on. Now, these are called slingshots. Their behaviour is a little bit like a slingshot. Rubber stretches and it kicks the ball away. Now we'll look at some ball guides. Now, these are wire ball guides. Basically control the direction the ball rolls in. Now you can also get plastic ones. Up here we've got some plastic ball guides. You see them on rollover lanes, on various games. They're really quite common. Now these are rollover switches. The ball rolls down and scores points or a feature. Now these are very common switches and you'll find them on pretty much every game. Here we have a captive ball. They come in different lengths and different configurations, but they're essentially all the same. Hit the ball with another ball in play and it moves, hits a target, goes over a switch. This is a typical drop target bank. It has targets that fall down when they're individually hit by the ball, and when you get the last one down, it will typically reset. Basically all target banks are the same. They come in larger numbers or smaller numbers of targets, and they may look a little different, but the theory of operation is pretty much exactly the same on all makes and models over the years. This is an ejectile. It holds the ball when it falls in and then kicks it back out. A similar thing to the ejectile is a VUK. The purpose of a VUK, vertical up kicker, is to kick the ball up onto a ramp or a gadget, that sort of thing. A vertical up kicker is pretty much the same as an ejectile, just kicks with more power and kicks straight up. This is a vertical up kicker in operation. Another assembly found in most pinball machines up until modern times is typically found in the cabinet or in some games in the head box, and that's the knocker assembly. Its purpose is just to make that sound when the player wins a free game. Modern games still make this sound, but they've removed the assembly and replaced it with an electronic sound, basically like a soundtrack playing the same sound. I personally like the sound of the knocker. Now here we have a ball shooter, also known as a ball plunger, and its simple function is to shoot the ball into play. Some ball shooters have a button the player presses to launch the ball automatically. Some games have a more exotic feature like a replica pistol to shoot the ball, and some games even have both, an automatic feature and a regular ball plunger to shoot the ball into play. Let's look at some of the Playfield ramps. Now there's three main types of ramps. There's the metal ramps, as you can see there. There's the wire ramps, as you can see here. And then there's the plastic ramps. Ramps come in all different shapes and sizes, of course, but they're always made out of one of these three materials. Here we have a spinner, and as the name suggests, the ball hits it, it spins, and you score points. Spinners are common on many games and come in different shapes and sizes, but they all do the same thing: spin to award points or features to the player. There are 5 main types of switches: micro switches, leaf switches, opto switches, piezo switches, proximity switches. These all perform the same tasks, either scoring points or identifying the ball's location on the playfield. Most switches are located on the underside of the playfield, as you can see on this playfield here, but some can be also attached to ramps and other spots in the play area. Now here we have a bumper switch, also known as a cup switch. The assembly's been removed. This is the bumper assembly installed. Here it is without the bumper assembly, but the cup switch remains in place. Here we have a rollover switch. This is a drop target bank. As you can see, the switches are on the side here. When the target falls down, the switch closes. Drop target banks also have opto switches. Now let's look at some other targets. Along with drop targets, you'll also find bullseye targets, as seen here. The ball hits them to award various features or points. Another type of target you'll see is your stand-up switch, seen here behind this slingshot. The ball closes the switch and the kicker kicks. Stand-up switches can be found behind slingshots and behind various other rings scattered around the playfield on some games. Now here we have some star rollover switches. These were quite common in the 70s, 80s and even some 90s games, then seemed to drop off the pinball playfields for a while. As you can see, the ball just simply rolls over them and they go down from the weight of the ball as the ball rolls over them. A nice simple switch design. Now there's a couple of common types of micro switches. Here on this outhole assembly you'll see both. This is the small micro switch, generally common on rollover switches like return lanes, out lanes, that sort of thing. And this is the larger type of micro switch. You often find them on coin switches and coin doors as well on older games. Now here we have a couple of typical micro switches. These are located on the return lane and the out lane. You'll often find them in other areas too. You'll also find switches on various gadgets and motorized assemblies. In this one here, for example, plastic tunnels underneath the playfield. Another one here, this is an opto switch to tell the machine where the position of the device is. Here we have a typical opto switch assembly. Now this switch has no moving parts. Instead, there's an invisible beam of light that gets broken when the ball passes between the two sensors, as this screwdriver shows here. You can hear the switch being registered. Opto switches are convenient, especially in areas where you don't have room to fit a micro switch or a leaf switch, but they're not as reliable as micro switches or leaf switches. Being a relatively delicate electronic component, opto switches don't stand up to the vibration and impact from the ball. I'd like to pay special attention to the opto switches found in the Williams ball trough assembly starting from the early 1990s. After games like Doctor Who, they moved to having opto switches on the ball trough assembly, which proved to be very unreliable. the impact from the balls falling in there and being kicked back out, the vibration and shock waves caused by that, resulted in optos breaking, resistors breaking, that sort of thing. Now here we have a couple of those circuit boards that I've removed. I'll just bring them into camera. As you can see, quite a lot of components, small ones, and as with all electronics, they're really rather delicate. These two circuit boards, they form part of the ball trough assembly. Much less reliable than the micro switches previously used, or the leaf switches that were used before that. The other two types of switches, proximity switches and piezo switches. This is a piezo switch, also known as smart switch, seen here. There's no adjustment on piezo switches. They're essentially an electronic switch that if you have a fault or a failure, you replace. Piezo switches really weren't a good choice. I'm sure they were introduced into pinballs simply as a cost-cutting measure at the manufacturing level in order to cut production times. They really didn't prove to be very reliable, and you'll find them in rollover switches as seen here, and in stand-up targets and bullseye targets. They were particularly unreliable in bullseye targets as they didn't stand up to the constant impact and shock from the ball hitting them and soon failed. You can actually replace a piezo switch with a micro switch or a leaf switch in some situations. Proximity switches are quite rare. I don't have one here to show you, but if you do have a problem with those, they'll either be replaced or you'll need a technician to diagnose and repair the problem. There are three separate lamp groups. The first group is controlled lamps. They turn on and off or can stay on to highlight various features and targets. You can see them flashing on and off on this Indiana Jones playfield. The second group is flash lamps. They're usually larger, very bright lights that only flash for 1 or 2 seconds. They may briefly flash on and off repeatedly too. As you can see, this light jackpot feature has a flash lamp. Another flash lamp here is on the right ramp, seen flashing in green. The third group is general illumination lighting, which is usually lit continuously, but on some games it can be switched off or dimmed for special effects. The general illumination lights are found under the playfield plastics at the top and on both sides and the central areas of the playfield to provide general lighting. As you can see here, the lighting's gone out. This game allows controlled general illumination. Now this is a ball channel. As you can see, it's under the playfield. It transports the ball from one location to another location on the playfield underneath. So the ball will drop in here, travel down here, and then this vertical up kicker, VUK, will kick it back into play. There's lots of different types of tunnels you can encounter under a playfield. This one's metal. Another example of an under playfield tunnel is this one. As you can see, this one's made of clear plastic, but they do come in black plastic, and I have seen a few other colours too. Now we'll look at some of the more common assemblies found underneath the playfield. This is the flipper assembly, left flipper assembly in this case. Here's the right one. Here we have a slingshot assembly. Here we have a vertical up kicker assembly. Down here in the corner we have a couple of bumper assemblies, 3 in fact. And another one just here. This assembly in the middle here is the mini playfield assembly on this Doctor Who. It raises and lowers during gameplay to expose various features. It's a motorised assembly. This is the ball eject assembly. It's also an identical assembly to one you'd find on a typical ejectile. Some ball eject assemblies are part of the ball trough unit and some aren't. This one is separate. Just here is the ball chute assembly on this Doctor Who. Doctor Who has an automatic ball shooter assembly. There's no manual ball plunger for the player to use. The player just hits a button to shoot the ball on Doctor Who. That covers some of the more common assemblies you'll find underneath a pinball playfield. Well, that's the end of this show. I hope you found it helpful. And while you're here, have a look at our other shows too. Remember, if you're in the Brisbane area or surrounding districts, you can telephone us on 07 3901 5430 to obtain expert help repairing your pinball machine or arcade video game. Please tap the like icon and leave any comments below. Your suggestions for future shows are very welcome, and remember to tap the red subscribe button and you'll be notified when we add new shows. I'm Mark Snyder. Thanks for watching Pinball Expert. See you next time.
The Pinball Expert show is produced by All Pinball Australia.
Who played my ball?